So what we're going to be talking today is how school communities handled classroom demands while also trying to recover from one of the worst natural disasters in modern Texas history. One of the first questions I wanted to ask you guys is to briefly talk about where you were when Harvey hit. How were you and your neighbors affected by this hurricane?
Okay, I'll start there. So I live in the Meyerland area, so we were affected. My house did not flood. However, because the day before was, it rained, it was not as bad. We walked the bayou. It was up there, but it wasn't as high. My son wanted to celebrate the birthday with his friend, so I allowed him to go. And I was like, I got to get this boy back home. So in the midst of coming home, it started raining really bad, and the street where I come down floods pretty rapidly. And I had a little car, and I knew to pull over before I would, be flooded out. So I did. I pulled over in close in my neighborhood into somebody's yard, and I called a friend, and I had another friend that lived in that area, and that friend came and got us. So we ran to his house, just 4 houses down, and we stayed there that night. We were able to make it home the next day. We walked through the flooded waters and made it home. It was just 2 blocks, and our home was fine. Just some roof damage a little bit. And so, so that's where I was that day that it flooded. And then I just remained in my house for the next couple of days until we were able to go out, and I got my car and brought it back home.
Because I'm a principal of elementary school. In Wharton, we have a river, the Colorado River runs right by Wharton. And so we have had flooding before, but only in certain areas. So I think in the beginning, that's what we were expecting. And then as things got worse, we had lots of gullies and creeks that flooded. So then it became our whole town was flooded, and we were just an island. The only way you could get out of Wharton and get to a hospital or anywhere else was by life flight or helicopter. So it became a really very difficult situation. My husband's a paramedic, so I was helping him at the time because he was working 24-hour shifts through the whole flooding process. And so then I volunteered at shelters, helping my neighbors. My personal home did not flood, but we do have rental property that did flood. And so we were constantly checking on those areas, but it got to the point where you really couldn't get to too many places. So I was basically huddled at the junior college in Wharton with my husband, where they had staged the paramedics at the time.
So for me, I believe we just started school about a couple of days ago, and then so we were kind of taken aback by the fact that a hurricane happened, and so we were still in that mindset of getting back to school. And so when we got home, everyone was like, "Oh, we're pretty sure we're all going to go to school the next week." And then when it actually happened, a lot of us just stayed in our homes. But luckily, not much of students in our area had flooding in their homes. I know a couple of us had roof damage, myself included, but there are areas on West Belfort and stuff where there was flooding, and we did have a friend that had her entire home flooded out. And so it just kind of varied, but majority of our students weren't flooded out, and so it was a lot easier, and we're more fortunate than a lot of other students in your different areas.
I was very blessed to not get flooded in. My husband and I, we have 5 children. So even though we didn't get flooded in, spending the 10 days with the kids, getting cabin fever was a lot. Our neighborhood was blocked off. The front of the neighborhood, I live in Fieldstone, which is in Richmond, Texas. The front of the neighborhood was flooded. The back where we live was not flooded. So thankfully we didn't get flooded, but we weren't able to leave the neighborhood for a few days. So when you have a household of 7 people, not being able to get groceries and having to ration off things like water or how many times you can change the baby, because at the time my son was 1, we had to kind of ration a certain amount of things for a few days. Also, my household has increased. We recently welcomed my mother to our household. So now we've gone from a household of 7 to a household of 8. So even though we did not experience any kind of water damage, we are feeling the effects of Hurricane Harvey, definitely within our family. Our budget is a little bit tighter now because we have more people in the house.
There's a survey that the state took of districts in the area that was affected by Hurricane Harvey. I think there was a count of more than 13,000 teachers who were homeless in some form after the hurricane. So they had to stay with a friend or live in their car or live in a hotel until they could either get new homes or return to their homes. What were the challenges for you as educators and as students of having teachers who might have had other priorities to deal with at the beginning of the school year?
It was very, very difficult. And in fact, I even had a teacher that ended up leaving in August. She had just moved to our town and she lost everything. And so she decided to go back where she was from, and because she wanted to be near her family and a support system. So that left me without a teacher in August. And those of you that are in the education business understand how difficult it is to find teachers at that point in time. I was lucky enough, though, a young man came and interviewed with me, and he's been awesome. So it ended up being okay for us. Unfortunately, we had a lot of staff that were affected. And my administrative assistant, in fact, just got back in her house last month. And she is still going through stuff and trying to get back to some normalcy. We had probably close to over 100 staff, and we're a small school district. So only 10,000 people in our little town. So it was very devastating. And when you have staff that are in need of lots of things, and just like you, they are all living in situations that they're fine in the beginning, but now you're starting to see, especially people that have not recovered, have not been able to get back into their homes. The stress, I think you feel real happy that you're able to have a place to live, and you feel very thankful for that. But as we all know, after a while, when you're living with 7, 8, 9 people in a home that really should only have, maybe 3 or 4, it does become very stressful. So we are definitely seeing the effects on our staff, and we'll get into the whole student situation.
Yeah, so during this time, a lot of my teachers had their homes actually flooded because a lot of them don't live in the district. And so as a senior, we had a lot of things already on our minds, especially about the college application process within our first semester and getting a lot of things that needed to be done. But additionally, I was involved in a lot of extracurriculars like debate and FBLA for business. And so both of my sponsors were actually out because for my debate sponsor, she actually found out she had cancer right around that time, and it was remedial, so she just realized that she had to take on treatment and everything else. And so it was such a huge block in the road, not only for us but also for her. And she also lost her car in the flood during that time, and it was really tricky for her just to navigate through. And so it did take a lot on us. And so I think after the first 9 weeks of school, she decided to take off and actually get treatment full time. And we all agreed unanimously that was the best decision, even though knowing her, she really wanted to be there and be there for us, especially knowing that it was my senior year and it was a big thing for our debate program. And so with that being said, I took on a lot of responsibilities and roles that I didn't expected to take on, especially walking into senior year, thinking that, it was going to be my last year. I can take advantage of everything there was to offer. I could finally, be able to really blossom in the events and the extracurriculars that I wanted to, but having both of my sponsors, for my FBLA sponsor, her entire home was flooded out. And so a lot of times she was preoccupied trying to make sure that her home was fixed and that the contractors were doing their jobs. But then later on, halfway through the year, she tore her meniscus. And so she had to be out with surgery as well. And so it felt like a lot of burdens and a lot of obstacles that were just placed there. And, you know, they're not all because of the storm, but a lot of it did felt like it was because of the storm that was hindering us. And so it was a lot more difficult, but you know, thanks to the amazing staff that I have at my school that were really able to be supportive. And like many of our teachers volunteered to help us with our programs or like go out to us on debate tournaments every weekend and still allow us to have the same programs, although it wasn't like before, but it was the effort that they put in that really helped us to continue on for the next year. And so I'm truly appreciative of that because I know that the storm affected many of our teachers, but they still come every single day and still put on a good face and try to help us as much as possible. And especially for a lot of us with seniors, the college application process is such a big deal. And it was one of those things where a lot of us were a little nervous about just because a lot of our teachers were gone and we couldn't get like recommendations letters in time and different things. Like I know personally, like when I applied to Harvard and a lot of like my paperwork didn't go through at a certain time, like a lot of my teachers helped scramble to get me what I needed in time. And like it was in those moments that I was truly appreciative of what they were doing for me and like many of my other classmates as well, even though the storm did take a huge toll on their personal lives and how their work lives were affected as well.
I would say because at Elsik 9th Grade Center, we had 78% of our staff that was affected by the storm. And the same thing at our campus, a lot of the teachers and staff, they don't live in the Alief area. They were in the Fort Bend area, and that area took a large hit. Congrove, Richmond, that area took a really, really large hit. The struggle with coming back to work after missing so many days was real. Because you have a focus of making sure that the instruction that you're teaching the kids is on point, but you're still battling not having a home, or you have survivor's remorse and you want to give. We had several events on my campus to where we collected money on the campus and we gave teachers gift cards. Within my department alone, my department has come up with funds and given it to the few teachers that were affected out of the, I think we had 3 teachers affected out of the 9 on my science department. So to get them back on track when they come back, and my goal is the instructional specialist. So I want to make sure that when the kids come back, even though they've missed 10, 11 days, that they're coming back to good instruction. But I also have to make sure that the mental health of the teachers is on point in addition to the students. So we had to finagle a way to make sure that students had a voice, that teachers had a voice, that we're not being too quote unquote pushy and making sure these demands are met. And at the 9th Grade Center, as you all know, it's biology, and that's the end of course exam. So on the 9th grade campus, we hold 3 out of the 5 end of course exams. So there's a lot of stress already because on our campus, we zone in on interventions. We want to make sure that when the 9th grade kids come to us, that they can at least get 3 out of 5 done and they go to main campus and they only have 2 left. So at the beginning of the year, there's stress, and then you have Harvey, and that increases the stress in addition to the staff and some of the students coming to us do not have what they feel they should have on a day-to-day basis. If you don't have what you need on a day-to-day basis, you're not as concerned about education because that's not something that you get immediate from, right? That's not an immediate need. Your immediate need is to make sure that you have food, that you have a roof over your head, and that was definitely a challenge that we felt this year more than any other year.
Can you talk briefly about how you decided with, 10, 11, more than that days gone from your schedule, but you still had the same amount of material to teach. How did you decide what you were going to still teach and what you were going to pass on teaching for the year? Tiffany or Jennifer?
Ooh, I hate the term pass on teaching because as educators, you want to make sure that the parents know that you're giving them the best that you can. And we still kept that in mind. When we came back, the first day we came back, it was just staff. And so I was able to meet with my teachers, and we have something called professional learning communities, or PLCs, where we're able to sit down, look at data, look at the calendar. And at the beginning of the year, we do this. We have a calendar for the whole year, and we analyze it, and we say, oh, we have 11 days to teach this unit, and we have 12 days to teach that unit. And so we had to reconfigure that and say, hey, we missed these many days. And at the beginning of the year, that's our reporting category 1, which is the heaviest amount of material that's taught and tested on the end of course exam. That's our self-structure and function, which we don't do so well on. Let me put it like that. So we had to revisit that and make sure that we're incorporating the same Sweet 16. I call them the Sweet 16. Those are the 16 readiness standards that are tested on EOC. So we had to go back and make sure that we're teaching those readiness standards in addition to the current readiness standards that we have. So we had to reanalyze our whole lesson planning. Our focus, unfortunately, was because we have limited time, we simply focused on the Sweet 16. And we scattered in the supporting standards where necessary, but to make sure that they can pass the EOC and get enough sustenance out of biology to where they can go to chemistry and do well. We focused on the Sweet 16, and we finagled the days that we have, because we didn't get any more days, we got days taken away. So we had to make sure that we're still providing really, really, really great instruction and ensuring that the kids pass the test. In doing that, some extra things such as field trips and project-based learning activities that may take a few days, we had to revisit that. Hey, maybe not this year. This year may not be the time that you want to do it. And we hated having to do that, because when you do extra activities like that, the kids grasp the concept so much more in depth to where you can actually achieve mastery learning. Within the time frame, what we did to make sure that we're monitoring that they're understanding the concept taught in class, we did something called mini assessments, where we would assess the readiness standards. I only pulled for the readiness standards. My teachers were responsible for teaching both all concepts, readiness and supporting, but I only pulled for the readiness standards, which are called the Sweet 16. And the thought process behind that was to make sure that the kids got the readiness standards so strongly to where it's definitely asked on the test, they could at least pass by understanding the readiness standards to the best knowledge. So we pulled them doing after-school tutorials, which she witnessed. Participation wasn't that great, about 40 to 50%. And we also did pull-outs to where we would pull them out during an elective period, not during any of the core, of course, but we would pull them out during an art class, which I hated doing that also, or pulling them out of a PE, which I didn't like doing that, but we didn't really have any other options, especially if the parent said, no, my son or daughter cannot stay after school because they're working. What I noticed this year, out of any other year, I've been doing this for almost 5 years, right? This year, it was so hard to get the kids to stay after school. And a lot of times you'll hear, oh, well, I have to work. And sometimes I call mom, because I do that. And they're like, they don't have a job. You know, they can stay after school. What are you talking about? And then they'll talk to their son and da-da-da-da-da-da. Yes, Miss Robinson, I'll stay. But this year, they really did have to work. You know, so we had more students this year that could not stay after school because they had to work, or because they had to watch a sibling, or because they had to pick up a sibling from a middle school or elementary school. So what I noticed, because of Hurricane Harvey, you had a lot more resources that were spread out. Now the older kids are having to have more responsibilities, whether it be watching siblings or whether it be actually helping out with the job and bringing money into the family. I did notice that. So because of that, I said, okay, we're gonna have to do a pull-out, and let's pull them during one of their elective periods so it won't hurt any other of their Common Core. And I say that only because we have 3 EOCs that we have to make sure the kids pass. So I couldn't pull them from English. I couldn't pull them from math. I didn't really want to touch social studies. So out of the options that we had, I took the lesser evil.
Okay, This is a lot because this was my second year at the campus where I am. And this is my 30th year in public education. I've done various things. And when we decided, my second year, we decided as a school that we needed a culture change. And so we had a great PD and decided to do the initiative, The Leader in Me, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but it is based on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. And so we were very excited. We had a wonderful training in July. Everyone was on board. It was awesome. And so then the Harvey hit. We had 10 days of no school. And with The Leader in Me, of course, there are lessons that go on during classes, and there's a lot of work with the teachers and a lot of different things that you do in this initiative. And unfortunately, it was tough because I had to really sit down with my teachers and explain to them, we're still going forward with this. We're not going to cut back because we need this more now than we even needed it before, because it was more about the social emotional piece of our children. And even though I was extremely concerned, and we have the same type of situation where we have to look at our curriculum, and we did all of that. We did all the planning, making sure the standards were taught. But I'm in a very interesting campus because I have a 3rd through 6th campus. So everyone tests. It's not just a few people. So our concentration on making sure the curriculum was taught was I guess you would say our level of anxiety was very high. So we definitely made sure that we were on point. We had 5 focus camps on Saturdays, and we didn't want to make them as, this was not, make it a bad thing. We wanted to make it more of a fun thing, so we called them camps instead of you gotta come to these tutorials, because normally in a regular situation, students don't like to stay after school to be tutored. And usually they're tired, the teachers are tired. So we felt that we were going to tackle this from a different angle. So we made it more of this is going to be fun, and we're going to think of other ways to tackle the standards and make it more of a hands-on situation. And those in the beginning, they weren't as, people weren't that excited about it, but the kids came and then they realized, oh, this is fun. We want to come. Then we had a lot more people that ended up attending, and the teachers even, they're like, I had way more participation from my staff than I thought I would on a Saturday. So it ended up, that was awesome. But we really, when something like this happens, and for the normal person, you would think 10 days is not that big of a deal. But especially for schools like ours, we're a Title I school, where we were a little bit behind the 8 ball to begin with, it really took a toll for us, because when you're trying to finagle and figure out exactly how you're going to get your curriculum in a shorter period of time, it takes a lot of extra work. And I have to tell you, my staff was incredible. They stayed endless hours after school, and we planned more during the day, and we're very strategic and targeted about what that instruction looked like. Not like they don't do that anyway, but I really saw a sense of urgency with my staff. And I'm lucky because they are all about the kids, and they wanted everyone to get what they needed. So I'm super, super lucky. And being from a small town, I didn't get to note this before. Even though my staff was hurting and we had a lot of difficulties, I'm lucky in a small town like ours, we had a lot of support from various organizations. They gave us food and clothing and we even got a huge donation from a neighboring town. We were able to buy a bunch of books that were damaged and different things of that sort. Even though my school wasn't damaged, a lot of the students' belongings were. So we were lucky in the fact that we did have a support system in that way. There are other things I think that we could look at that would help our schools get some extra additional support, and maybe a planning piece for the state to look at to deal with traumas like this. I've not received any additional training on how to deal with trauma. And that's now I think we're noticing a lot more of the effects and how long it's going to take. I don't think anyone really knows, the effects of something like this on the long term. I am concerned about the testing and how that is such a focus. I really tried as a principal. Of course, you have to have accountability, and I knew that that was part of something we were going to have to tackle this year. But like you were saying, you're kind of on a balance beam because you want to hold people accountable, but you also know they're going home to a situation that's different than they've ever, things that they've ever had to deal with. So with students and staff, it has definitely been a balancing act of not pushing too much, and we've learned to come together, and you have to have real strong communications with staff, parents, and community. And so I think, unfortunately, when you do have disasters or any other type of thing that may change your regular lifestyle, people react in different ways. And I was noticing we were lucky that we were able to see the best in a lot of people come together and really work together.
Rhonda, as a social worker, can you talk a bit about what the mental health effects were of something like Hurricane Harvey? Did you see changes in the number of students who went to you, or did you talk to teachers who, were, as everyone has noted, there was an increase in stress and anxiety for obvious reasons after the storm?
Right. So I work in special populations, so I work with special ed specifically. I am housed at T.H. Rogers, but I also serve in the district any child with a hearing impairment and a visual impairment. One thing that I was thankful you had stated that effects of trauma. When Katrina came in 2007, an organization was sent a few years later because there was so much that impacted the students, the teachers. When you lose a school, and you lose several schools, because we did in HIC lose schools, that whole school, that whole population has to be transported to another school, shared, and that happened also in New Orleans. So they did send training in and Save the Children. The organization sent a social worker in, Tara Powell, who developed a curriculum. So when I came back to the schools, not only were the children are resilient. If they have the supports and they have the teachers that are there, some of the teachers aren't there because they were affected, but you have most of the teachers were able to come back, and they rely on that. They rely on consistency. So if that consistent piece is there, those children become resilient. And then also understanding. The teachers have to understand that they may not be in their home. And so with that piece, the children were fine. The secondary traumas that are happening in everyday lives with children exposed to illnesses or their families' illnesses or death or anything that's going on normal in life combined with a traumatic event like Harvey that affects everybody. It's not, even if you were not flooded, as you said, Harvey impacted everybody because you saw it on TV every day, you saw it and when you were stuck for 3 days in your house, that's all you were exposed to for that time. Teachers came back, didn't even know what day it was. So when I came back to the school, I saw the PTO had done such a wonderful job with one of our rooms prior to Harvey happening. I saw more teachers never had I seen so many teachers in our break room. There was a couch in there, it was relaxing. They've come in there for their own mental health to get it together, because for them to come back and be able to teach, they still had to get it together themselves. So this went on for about a couple of months. I talked with my teachers, I attended the PLC meetings as well, and they were just like, like, this is how they were, it's hard. On top of that, I was trained. Save the Children did come to Houston as well. They tried to train as many clinicians as possible, but Houston, guys, is so huge. Y'all know the greater Houston area and all the counties that were affected. It's just hard to come into a city like this and train people to go out and implement a curriculum. So a lot of the training that did take place, a lot of people weren't able to come to the trainings, but they did have that, and they still are ongoing. They're going to be here for a couple of years. And I think it's real important that piece continue, because that secondary trauma is there. People still aren't in their houses. Some people are in their houses, they still aren't repaired. And teachers as well as students are still coming and have to deal with that as well as learn.
Yeah.
What does something like this trauma or PTSD look like for students? I mean, I'm sure that, for small students, maybe it will look different than for older students. Mm-hmm. How do teachers tell if students have experienced trauma?
One of the things that I also, for myself, took mindfulness training. A lot of you have heard of mindfulness, and it teaches you, one of the pieces that I learned prior to learning that was trauma and how it affects the brain. When you're early on, your brain is developing, of course. And so if you have some type of traumatic event, it affects actually your development and your growth and your ability to learn because of that impact on the brain. So it's real important to get in there and give supports at an early age. When you're a little older, your brain is more developed, and so you're able to deal with things a little bit differently. So for a lot of things, PTSD does not, you're not really diagnosed with that until after 6 months. So if you're experiencing effects for at least 6 months and they're still experiencing them, then you can get that diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. But prior to that, it's just regular dealing with the effects of trauma in general or any event. So it's similar to ADHD, and a lot of people don't know that. So a child may be irritated, irritable, acting out. And I did a training where I taught the teachers to look out for that. They may come in the classroom and you're like, where's your homework? And they're screaming at you, I don't have my homework. What are you talking about? I'm not doing that, and you're like, okay, as a teacher, this child is here disrespecting you, they're being loud, they're screaming, you're just asking them for their homework. You didn't, but what's underneath? What's going on with that child? Maybe that child didn't have pencils and paper at home to do homework. Maybe that child didn't have a safe place to do that homework. So it's real important to kind of recognize what it looks like and then go, okay, step back and then refer, if you need to a counselor or social worker within your area.
I'm going to ask you guys one last question, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. You can start lining up at the mics if you have questions for our panelists. Almost a year later, the start of a new hurricane season officially at the beginning of June. Are the effects of Harvey over in your schools? What do you expect to see when the school year starts back again in late August and September?
Well, we're doing a lot of planning now for summer school, and we have been contacted by our region for some extra support with some social emotional help with our students. I think the effects are a lot longer lasting than we all realize. Exactly like you said, our students are showing the effects. I have kids, unfortunately, that are still traveling from Houston to Wharton, which is about a 45, I would say more Rosenberg area, about a 45-minute trek. So it's also affected our attendance. We've lost 200 students in our district. And so that's also going to create a problem for funding for us, because that's how we get funded as a public school. It's tough because some of our students, they still haven't found a place to live. So I'm really hoping, we are planning to do a lot more with the social emotional piece. I got some extra funding from the state that I applied for, but unfortunately I didn't get it till April. But anyway, we are still going to seek out some more social work help. I was able to hire a social worker to come and work with my students, and that was awesome. And I'll have to give them a little kudos. It's the Strides organization, and they were awesome. They came in, and I have a campus of 700, I guess I mentioned that. Anyway, they were able to see, oh gosh, about 40 to 50 students on a regular basis as soon as I got my funding. And like I said, unfortunately, it wasn't until April, but we saw great benefits from that. So we are going to continue that next year, and hopefully see how that plays out. But unfortunately, I just wish there were more out there for help, because we really aren't getting much help from the state.
So as an early college student, I think I had a pretty interesting situation being enrolled in both HCC and in high school, so juggling the two different courses. And so what I did notice this year was that for our underclassmen, there was more programs for them. Like we had SAT like boot camps and like ACT training, and then like a lot of us went into our Avid classrooms to help out with like teaching them to understand the college application process. And so I think the programs that we implement in our schools are really starting to help cushion a lot of the pushback that Harvey had for our up-and-coming seniors and our up-and-coming juniors, knowing that they're going to be taking on more of these rigorous courses head-on. And a lot of them are going into their senior year with a lot of, still some of that trauma, like you mentioned, from Harvey with last year. And I know that like once we leave, it's going to be a different climate that they have. But like this year, starting today was our first day of, I know, our freshman kind of like boot camp that we have. And so I saw that they started to implement more hands-on courses and really helping them to, I guess, keep them up with the coursework and really acclimate them to the new environment that they're going to be in, especially coming from that middle school mentality and also being affected with Harvey like last year and really stepping into a new environment. And so I think that's one of the benefits that we had at our school. But additionally, like one of the tricky things I had this year was a lot of my professors, they did not change their coursework. They still kept it the same, even though we were missing a lot of days, and they didn't really adjust. And they just said, like, this is what it is, and you just accept it for what it is. And so luckily, being an Alief, they did allow us to lighten up some of the coursework and kind of some of the different things that they could take away to really help us juggle with our college classes, which were so rigid in their programs. And so that was one of the benefits I saw that really helped me out, especially as a senior, going through a lot with, like juggling or different organizations that I was doing and different roles that I didn't expect to take on. But additionally, like, my parents had, our home had like roof damage, and so I was on the phone with insurance a lot of different times throughout the weeks. And then I had interviews with colleges and different things that like I didn't expect to come about. But going to a school that really was understanding, and our principal really helping us navigate through it, and our teachers, even though they were, like you guys mentioned, going through the trauma as well, but they kind of understood what we were going through, and it was really interesting, and it was really nice seeing them navigate not only their personal lives, but also how to help us get better. Because I did notice like a lot of our freshmen, they weren't really talking to the upperclassmen as we normally do, because in a school of only 400 kids, everyone normally talks to everyone. But this year it was a lot more different in the fact that they felt a little bit isolated to themselves. But a lot of our teachers helped us get to know them better, and also change the climate and the culture around it, so that they didn't feel like they were just in it for themselves. Because like as a senior, like I didn't have a lot of those state mandatory exams that like they had, but like we know that they're struggling not only with that, but also juggling with being in high school and going through that whole mentality of being hit by Harvey, but also juggling all these courses that they didn't expect with such a heavy course load. And so it was a really positive environment to be in, because I saw so many different things happen, and it brought out the good in a lot of us, because it pushed our students to work harder and to know that, you know, despite all the obstacles and the challenges that happen, they were still able to reach the goals that they needed to reach and meet a lot of the expectations that they set out for themselves. And so going to this next school year, I think a lot of them have that new mentality of, this is something I can continue, and that even though I faced a big obstacle last year, that just only proved that I could work hard and that I can progress even further. And so, especially with HGC as well, I think they're starting to understand a little bit more about our students, especially how the dual credit students are really understanding that environment, because a lot of the HGC professors as well were affected. So it was something that their relationship needed to understand each other a lot better. So I think overall, this next coming school year, our teachers and our students are understanding each other a lot better after the storm.
Looking forward to next year, and some things that I might change or keep the same. Making sure that we're building relationships when the school year starts is very important. I know in prior years we would do an activity for a day or two at the beginning. We wouldn't just go straight into biology. We would do something to where we're learning something from the students. So building relationship with the students and with your staff is very important. And I feel like that can combat a lot of anxiety. It can help us show some empathy towards each other so that we can show a strong support system, because there's a lot of trauma that could be that's not Harvey. School shootings, a death in the family, that encompasses a lot. So making sure that you're building relationships with those that you work with, the teachers that you work with, of course, the students, and definitely the parents. From this year, I have learned to increase my communication with the parents, for sure. And that has helped out a lot, and I've increased the speed at which I do interventions. So I would like to keep that the same next year. In prior years, we would only start doing interventions in the second semester, because we're like, oh, we're getting ready, EOC, let's get it. But what we are going to plan to do for the following year is, as we're noticing that students aren't getting the content, go ahead and start pulling them. And then, and making sure that we're integrating some intervention within the classroom teacher's time. So hopefully if we don't have a major trauma next year, we'll be able to incorporate some intervention that teachers could actually deal directly with their students instead of seeing me, someone they don't know, having to pull them. So a take back from this year is definitely making sure that you have communication across the boards. One of my barriers definitely is I don't speak Spanish, and we have a lot of Spanish speakers in my district. However, Google Translate has been helping me a lot, and I'll use all of our secretaries on campus also speak Spanish, so they have been helping out as well. And we have one person that helps me out with Vietnamese. Even though we service 90 different languages, those are the two dominant languages that we have on campus. So yeah, definitely increase in the speed at what we do interventions, but making sure we don't take anything out of the curriculum, making sure that we can plan for some project-based learning activities or some problem-based activities so the students can grasp it and achieve mastery learning.
Great. Let's start with questions. Let's start on this side.
Greetings. First of all, thank you all for your testimony. I heard a couple words tonight. My name is Damon Barone. I'm an Alief ISD parent and Alief ISD taxpayer. I heard stressful mental health, trauma, anxiety, PTSD tonight. My question is, although most of the staff that was affected by Harvey and Alief ISD do not live in the district, 2,600 of our students are homeless year-round. So I want to know what Harvey-like accommodations are implemented year-round for these students whom Harvey-like trauma is their lifestyle, and for those families as well. And if you don't have any implementations for those families and students, will you be more likely to do it now that you've experienced this trauma through Harvey? Thank you.
Okay. Almost definitely. And what's so funny is I started out in Alief when I started teaching 30 years ago, believe it or not. So kudos to Alief. It's a great school district. For Wharton County, it's very, very difficult. I do not feel like we've been given the resources as some other maybe larger school districts have been given. So my big push will be for next year and for the upcoming summer is to find resources and the different organizations to help our students. We still, I just got the numbers. We have 848 homeless children in our town of 10,000. So I can only imagine in a large school district what they're dealing with. So I think the biggest thing would be for the state to give us these organizations or these trainings or whatever they have, resources for us. I really feel like we kind of were forgotten about by the state. And there has to be some more resources out there to help us deal with these types of issues. I have one counselor, and believe me, she is a busy woman, and she does a phenomenal job. Thank goodness she knows almost everybody in the town, and we stay very well connected with our families. But unfortunately, even now, it's just a constant struggle. There's just a huge need, and I think with the school systems, we are a great place to get the word out and to help people find these resources. I'm sure there are resources out there. We just have not been given, nobody's really communicated with us to let us know what help is out there for our children and our families. And I can't speak for Alief, so I'm not sure, or Houston ISD.
Well, there's resources out there for homeless. It's actually a law, and it just depends on how the district deals with it as far as being able to provide those resources. But we used to have a person that's specifically, a social worker that was specifically for homeless, but we have a setup where we have actually a building and we have several workers that will address, it's limited. It's addressing food, it's addressing transportation, it's addressing clothing. So those things are addressed. As far as places to live, that's the one thing that's a state issue. That's nothing that a district can really take care of is where a person lives, because housing is something that's, affordable housing is something that's very hard to find, anyway. And then when Harvey hit, it just impacted that tremendously. So, one thing that you guys can do is one of my colleagues desperately has sought to add social work into one of the TEA guidelines. And you can call your legislator, your state representatives, and let them know, hey, we want to add, so that way each school can be given money specifically for social support within their district. And you just have to ask for that. You can just call your representatives in the state and ask for that to be included.
I do know in Alief ISD schools, each campus has communities and schools. It's an organization, so it's like a social worker on the campus, and they directly help students that are homeless. Because of the McKinney Veto Act, that's the law she's referring to, they can go to any school within that area. They're given resources. But with communities and schools, the problem is some students don't identify themselves as homeless. So when they do identify themselves as homeless, on our campuses, we have a CIS, communities and schools, we refer to them as CIS. They will speak with the CIS agent or person, and they will help the ball rolling with resources, whether it's to pay an electrical bill or book bags or finding glasses so they can see. Our schools do have a program set up in them to help the homeless students that we have in our district.
Go ahead, ask your question.
Hi, my name is Meredith Tolson. I'm a 6th grade teacher at Yes Prep Braze Oaks. My question is, so I've definitely seen the effects of Harvey teaching 6th grade and the behavior of kids, but as we have a new class coming in, what resources are there for teachers to learn more about the effects of trauma, either books or trainings? And then as the new year starts in August, how do we create this culture of caring without ignoring what happened, but also without having to like drag the trauma back up?
And that's HISD, right?
No, it's Yes Prep. It's a separate district.
It's a separate district. Oh, okay. I know there's something out there called social-emotional learning, and there's a whole curriculum for it. We have a department that a lot of things are for schools because they have to pay for everything. It's like they have to buy into it. So the programs are out there, but the district has to allocate the money, and then the principals have to see, okay, can I use this money? And especially if you have Title I funds, you do have a little bit more to utilize and bring programs in. So you basically have to just talk with your principals. Right now, there's free help available because of Harvey. We did get that. And so you want to contact Save the Children. They have a lot of grant money, and they're offering trainings. They're doing a new, I was told that there's a new curriculum that's going to be training lay people, not just clinicians, to be able to go out and train teachers and parents and whoever who wants to provide support. But social-emotional learning is what you want to look for and what you want to tag onto. But that curriculum does exist, and that would benefit. And so those 2 weeks of training that, the principals can do, with added to the curriculum that they already have to do, adding that in as a day would help so much because it really is a tremendous asset to have that piece.
That's the problem. Is the money. all programs, and I don't know, people realize we don't have any free programs to train or anything like that. So I think the most important thing, if there's anyone else in here that isn't from the Houston area, maybe from smaller towns outside of Houston, that you're going to have to seek the training out with your region centers. They're usually the ones that can help you with those types of things.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jacob Clementich, and I have a question for Rhonda. PTSD, which does it affect more? Which gender, male or female? And which age range is most likely to be affected? And also for Mr. Nguyen, which do you think was more affected? You, the student, or the teachers, or the staff of the school district that got flooded?
Wow. Statistic questions. At the pool. I don't know who it affects more. I mean, I think if in general, it's probably going to be male, but in situations, because like for instance, if you're in war, predominantly men are in war, so that's what's going to affect that population. When you have trafficking, a person who's experiencing that is mostly women. So then they're going to have that, of course, higher for sexual trafficking, so I'm referring to. So for that, I do not have, because I really don't work with people with PTSD specifically. And, but it can occur at any age. It's when you have the symptoms for 6 months or over that you're diagnosed. People don't always, sometimes it's misdiagnosed because sometimes people don't consider certain things as trauma. And especially if it's ongoing, you're in a situation for 2 or 3 years, you don't realize that that's a traumatic situation. And so at the end of it, when it's identified, it's like, oh, so identification is really important early on and by a professional. And then I don't, yes, your question.
What was my question? I'm sorry. Oh, no. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it was for Ann. Okay.
So what I noticed in schools a lot was a lot more of my guy friends weren't really open to sharing as much. I think it's just because of that culture of, I guess, like hypermasculinity, where you're not comfortable with sharing like what's happening at home, and it's more of like you put on a brave face and you just come to school. And so in regards to your question, I would think if anything it would be more of the males who feel as though it's something kind of like shameful in a way that like it happened to them or like they're going through something, but rather than sharing about it, they just hide it away. And additionally, I think our teachers and our students alike are sharing a lot of that trauma together, because it's not just teachers, but it's also students. And so both are trying to work at it at the same time, but both have two separate roles to play, but within the same environment. And so working together with that, with the trauma is one of the biggest things I think a lot of the schools and the school districts are working on, is that, one, teachers are going through it, but it's the students who immediately have to go in there and do the work, and it's the teachers who are guiding them. And so hopefully they can, if anything, in this new school year, have an open discussion about how to seek help if you need it, but also move forward in, you know, getting better with it, and that this isn't an obstacle that's going to stop them immediately, but it's only just a block in the road that they just need to get over.
Yeah, I think another piece of this puzzle, because I don't know if you all remember, but we also missed another 2 days of school because of the freeze. But my children, especially since I do have the younger age, we have noticed that everyone kind of rocks along, and we all are doing pretty good, and you know, everybody's doing a great job. And then all of a sudden we'll get a gully washer rain, and then our children, suddenly we get crying, parents wanting to come up and pick their kids up. And so the reaction to different things that they normally wouldn't react to, we've noticed. So exactly what you said, that communication piece is huge. And so we have definitely decided that next year, making sure that we have those different conversations with parents and understanding they're safe, they're going to be okay, and working with that open line of communication with the community. So it was funny. One day I'll never forget when I was sitting in my office and a young man and I were having a discussion about his behavior. And all of a sudden it just started pouring down rain, and he looked outside and he goes, "I got to call my mom." And I was like, what's wrong? And he's going, "I have to call my mom now. It's raining. I've got to call my mom." And so it was terrifying for me at the look on his face. And it broke my heart, because I was thinking, oh my gosh, he thinks it's going to flood again. So we had to have that whole conversation. We called his mom. She made it very clear to him that, you know, she was okay. So it was a weird type of situation where we kind of would be fine, and then something would happen that would trigger emotions. And so that it was definitely interesting to work with.
Enough to be able to address that, which was good. Some people don't recognize that.
Yes, I've learned that in my age.
That's my trainer right there.
I think we have just a couple minutes left. So do you want to take the last question?
Sure. I'm Janet Posmentier with the Center for School Behavioral Health at Mental Health America of Greater Houston. And I think it's interesting that the topic was about Harvey and public ed, but it was really more about trauma and how trauma and mental health affects children's ability to be successful academically. And of course, they're instructors as well. So I want to thank you, Aaliyah, and the Texas Tribune for bringing us together today and shining a light on this very important problem that is always with us. It just was exacerbated by the storm. And I wanted everybody to know that Mental Health America of Greater Houston, the Center for School Behavioral Health, received grants from both UNICEF and the Harvey Relief Fund. And we are offering free training in trauma and mindfulness and suicide ideation and other kinds of things to help you with helping your faculty and your students. And so we welcome you to contact us. My colleague Lauren is right back there. She is the point person for this training, and please see her as soon as you can. And thank you again for all you're doing. I cannot imagine what you all have been through this year, and you all are heroes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Janet. Great. Well, I think that's our time. Please thank our panelists for coming out and talking to us. And thank you all for coming to this event.